Hello, and welcome to the Perfect Franchise Podcast.
I'm Chris, and joining me is my wonderful co-host, Andrea.
In this podcast, we're on a mission to help you discover all that franchising has to offer.
We'll explore expert strategies, interview successful franchise owners, and give you the tools to make informed decisions.
So whether you're considering your options or you're ready to take that plunge, we're here to support you every step of the way.
So let's jump into today's episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the TPF Podcast. We're super excited today. Andrea and Andrea's fresh back from Croatia. We're super excited today to have Scott Frith, Chairman and CEO of Happinest Brands. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to having you here too, Scott. And so, Scott, start us out a little bit. Tell us, how did you get into franchising? Start way back. How did you even venture into this?
So I'm going to go all the way back.
Okay.
My family's from Philadelphia. My parents decided they wanted the family to have a little bit of a different lifestyle, moved out to the burbs, bought a house, had a lawn for the first time, and hired lawn doctor. And so my father was in franchising. He worked for Cotman Transmissions, which is now part of AMCO. He became really good friends with the franchisee who serviced our lawn. And he was looking for a change. That franchisee introduced my father to the founder of Lawn Doctor, Tony Giordano. And at 6 years old, my father pulled in the driveway with a new job, turned our laundry room into a home office, and started selling franchises in 1978. So that was, kind of his journey. When I was 13, I started in our manufacturing plant where we build our equipment, outfit vehicles, that sort of thing. And fresh out of college, I joined the company as a marketing assistant nearly 30 years ago.
Wow. Long history.
65 years between my father and I, who's since retired.
Okay. Wow. So you start out as a marketing assistant at Lawn Doctor, right? And are with Lawn Doctor for many years. What caused the birth of not just Lawn Doctor, but Happinest Brands? Where did that idea come from, and why'd you do it? Because that's a big step.
Yeah, huge step. So about 13 years ago, my father retired, and I stepped into this role as chairman, CEO. And I actually remember the day when I sat in this seat for the first time, and we had planned for it, sort of for a long time. And it just felt different, the responsibility to sort of take the company to the next level and build on that legacy. And so my first focus was really kind of foot in the past, kind of respecting that legacy, foot in the future, really sort of innovating, changing the trajectory of the company respectfully based on all the success we want to accelerate its growth. And then kind of looked at what was next. And Happinest was a thought. It was something I had wanted to do for years. And ultimately, several years later, we acquired and partnered with Andy Fuller from Mosquito Hunters, and since then have added a number of different brands. So really built around the success of Lawn Doctor, but just seeing a lot of opportunity in the marketplace was something I always wanted to do.
Yeah. So, you add on a brand, and now you have a lot of brands that you're putting on. So help our listeners understand, what is sort of a brand family? I use that term. There's somebody who goes out and has just, you were just Lawn Doctor back in the day. Now you're Lawn Doctor plus other franchises. So it's sort of this family brand. What's the advantages of that?
So I think, certainly the community is bigger. That's one of the things we talk about all the time is community. So we have over 400 franchisees. We have nearly 900 territories. I love the stat. We have 4,000 years of collective experience across the platform, which is really pretty incredible and quite unique. So I think just expanding that family, as you said, that community is the word we use. The bigger you are, the better everyone gets. I have a mantra that I don't typically share, but it's everything the same, different for a reason. And so what that means is everything in the platform is exactly the same, except if it has to be different because of some uniqueness of the brand, some differentiator in the brand. And that allows us to get a lot of leverage. So think about all those franchisees out in the communities, learning, growing, bringing back those best practices. And then we're doing the very best thing and propagating that across the platform so every franchisee can win. So I think you start with community and kind of bringing people into a culture of sharing, right? And that's all the way through the life cycle. Every franchisee, I would say, at some point in time says to us, man, you talked about this, but this is absolutely amazing, right? So you set that expectation from the beginning, and good attracts good. You know, Chris and I have talked about that before, where you just bring in great people and more great people want to join the team. And then those great operators share those best practices. I think that's a really big part of it. Obviously, the infrastructure is a big part of it. You know, the platform and Lawn Doctor, and we've been around for over 60 years now. And so over that time, you've learned a lot, you've built that infrastructure, and now you can kind of leverage those shared services to the benefit across all the brands. So, you know, those are some of the big things that I would say franchisees in particular benefit from.
Okay. So two-part question. So for people who aren't familiar, what are the brands under the Happinest umbrella? That's part one. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure. So Lawn Doctor, of course, we've talked about that, you know, 60 years, long legacy, number one in our category from a franchise perspective. We added Mosquito Hunters, which is going through a transformation that's super exciting to move into general pest control and add holiday lighting, which is kind of counter-cyclical and a big opportunity that's growing very rapidly. Then we added Maids, of course, in the home cleaning, environmentally sensitive, you know, care around your home. And then Elite in Canada and Sparkle Squad here in the US, which window cleaning, gutter cleaning, power washing. And then we bolted on holiday lighting, as I said, to complement sort of the core businesses.
Okay. So those are the brands. And you said the bigger we get, the better it is for everybody. And you talked about infrastructure, but can we get into details? Like, what are we talking about? Like, if I'm somebody looking at one of your brands, I'm thinking about only that particular brand. I'm thinking about only Mosquito Hunters, or I'm thinking about only Sparkle Squad. The fact that you have hundreds of other franchises and other brands, how does that really help me? And specifically, what are you doing for me that's leveraging that infrastructure?
Yeah, so certainly from a marketing perspective, I go back to that everything the same, different for a reason, right? And so, you know, we have a data-driven approach in marketing. We have a test and learn. You know, the ad content, of course, is going to be different for each brand, but the approach, the methodology, you're leveraging a team in that case of 15, 16 people and several agencies. Everybody wins in that kind of scenario. A call center would be another good example where, you know, we have leverage that we get from having agents who represent multiple brands that really one brand, it would be really hard to do the kinds of things that we're doing and making the investments. Even from a coaching perspective, we've invested really heavily in our coaches, and the approach, the methodology is very much the same, and everyone's going through the same kind of skills-based training and EQ kind of training to become better coaches. And of course, that's a better connection between the franchisee and the coach, driving better outcomes for franchisees. Just, you know, as a few examples, but, you know, very material differences, whether you're the brand that just started and we have 30 franchisees, or the brand that's been around for 60 years with 250 franchisees, you benefit from that leverage.
Okay.
So Scott, all the brands you listed are home services. Why home services? Why are you focused on that? And are you looking to expand outside of that?
Yeah, great question. So I would clarify, we're almost all home services and then a little bit of commercial services, right? There's just some natural overlap there, and there's some really good dynamics relative to commercial that we like. Home service specifically, it's a massive category, right? It's like $600 billion or so. So there's scale there. Demographically, you have baby boomers who are aging in place is sort of the terminology that's used, right? They're living much longer. They're staying at home, and of course they need home services. So you have 70 some million consumers who need those kind of services to the extent they have a single family home where our services would apply. You have millennials who, quite frankly, they're just an outsourced generation, generally speaking, right? It's like valuing experiences and just not wanting to do the things around their homes that maybe prior generations did as they were coming up. And so, another 70 some million consumers who would be consumers of our services. So you kind of look at the scale, you look at sort of the demographic bubbles and where those are headed. You also look at, like, everyone's had a bad home service experience, right? You call someone, they don't show up, they do the work, and you're like, wait, what just happened? Like that's not good, and they don't stand behind it, type of thing. So people want great experiences. They want brands that they can trust, and I often call it like the Uber, DoorDash, Amazon effect. Like, consumer preference and the behaviors are really changing, where it's like, I want it now. I want it done really well. And what's happening is the mom and pops that make up a lot of that $600 billion, they just can't keep up with that, right? And so you see a lot of share shift happening towards brands that can deliver the experience customers want. And so we just really like the space. And clearly it's something that we know really well. We know the customer, we understand how to satisfy the customer. So we've got a high concentration in that space.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned is marketing, and you do a lot of marketing, especially digital marketing. Super impressive, right? And then you have a call center. So the marketing works, people pick up the phone, call in, and the call center answers it. Sounds like easy street to me if I'm a new business owner. So let's set expectations for those listening. You do a lot for the franchisees. They still have a lot to do for themselves. So can you talk to that about where that division of labor is and what you expect of the franchisees?
Yeah, and I love that you said that. We really set expectations with franchisees. Chris, I think you know that. This is a long-term relationship. I mean, many of our Lawn Doctor franchisees are now second generation. They've been with us 30, 40 plus years. So everything comes back to relationship. So we can't set an expectation before you're a franchisee and then you cross over the other side and everything's different, right? So we're very careful to make sure people know that this is incredibly hard work. We are not going to be able to do the work for you. It's not for everyone. We are never perfect. We're going to make mistakes in all the areas that we talk about here, but we're going to do it with franchise relationships and unit economics in mind. We're going to do what's right for the brand, and we're human, right? So going back to expectations, we do certain parts to take that off your plate. Like with regard to marketing, we want to be a marketing center of excellence. That's a core competency for us, for sure. It's one of the first questions a franchise candidate asks, like, how do you get me customers? And you have to be really good at that if you want to be a good franchisor. At the same time, there's a lot of responsibility that falls on the franchisee to get out in the community, wear your gear, drive your vehicle, build relationships, go to these community events, build the brand there, put out materials. And it's a very shared approach that's very measured in our system as to, we do this, you do that, and together, 1 + 1 is 3 type of thing. And if you don't do your part as a franchisee, we tell you right up front that this isn't right for you because you will not be as successful, right? And so I think that's really important. The same thing with respect to like the call center. We will never be as good as a franchisee when they get really polished in sales and they're in the community and they can speak to that. The challenge and why we built it at great effort and expense was because franchisees couldn't get to the leads. Go back to Uber, Amazon, DoorDash. People want now. And if you're in the community active, or you're coaching up your employees, or you're engaging with a customer that you already have, you can't answer every call. You can't answer every web form immediately. So it's a matter of scale and having the capacity. So we're going to be that point of connection. franchisees are still going to make sales, right? And so we're just really careful to set that expectation that it's very shared across that whole customer journey between us and our franchisees.
Yeah, that's important. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it is, Scott, because I think, we have clients all the time. I mean, I used to be a home service franchisee, so I am definitely the person that says I couldn't have done it without the franchise. But we have a lot of clients that say, why couldn't I just do this on my own? Seems like a home service. Like if I have to go out and do the marketing, I can just do it on my own, right? So, you hit on a lot of those points. How would you answer that though?
Um, it's really hard to go it alone, particularly now. I mean, business just moves so fast. And you want someone, I often use the analogy, and I mean this incredibly respectfully. The franchisor's job is to be up on top of the mountain, and the franchisee's job is to be down on the road, traversing the road day to day, running the business. It doesn't mean that I'm on this mountain and I'm superior and our franchisees are inferior on the road below. I should be looking out, and my leadership team should be looking out 5 years, 10 years. And in fact, we do that and have plans relative to that. The franchisee has to execute day to day to deliver the employee experience, the customer experience, and to make sure that the business is operating well day to day. And there's just this incredible power that comes from it's why I wanted to spend my life in franchising, like the franchisor doing their job well and the franchisee doing their job well. There's just this powerful synergy that's one of the most special forces in small business that I believe in to my core. To try to do that alone and not have like a Sherpa, somebody who's up on the mountain kind of helping, I just think is hard. We could get into all kinds of topics in terms of, data management, BI, AI, the pace of change with just core foundational technologies. I think to do that on your own in a small business would be incredibly challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of you have extremes in your portfolio, right? You have lawn doctors, 60 years, hundreds of location or territories, right? Then, a year ago you had Sparkle Squad, which had maybe a handful of locations, right?
Yeah.
Are those different kinds of people that should be joining either one? Meaning, are you looking for different traits in a new lawn doctor franchisee than you are for a new Sparkle Squad
Yeah,
franchisee?
it's really interesting. Let me just go back and kind of slice that a little bit. So Sparkle Squad had zero. It was actually something that I drew on a piece of paper one day. I looked at every industry and kind of stack ranked the industries we wanted to be in, and it was at the very top. And there were some specific attributes we loved about it. And I wanted to have a brand, so we registered the trademark. We got the URL, all the core stuff, and then we looked for a partner. And I was introduced through a mutual friend to Chris Stonis, who's just, you and I have talked previously, Chris. He's just an incredible person. And instantly I knew this was our partner. He had elite in Canada. He had over 10 years of experience running that business, and he wanted exposure to the US market. And we just instantly connected, and it's been amazing ever since. So we literally started a concept with zero here in the US, and we have, 650 or 660 locations with lawn doctors. So just to sort of frame the disparity there, as you said, I think the core of a franchise candidate is the same, right? You want, liquid capital, net worth, the demographics in terms of age tend to be pretty similar. I think the desire to build something meaningful, like what I go back to is what's the franchisee's why? What are their goals? And, they fall into some pretty specific categories. Like they want to model certain behavior for their children. They want to maybe create a business they could pass on to their children. They're corporate refugees that want to leave the corporate world and kind of build something themselves. And certainly they want an income stream. They want an asset that's valuable in the end, right? Like those kind of things are not going to change. I think somebody who grew up and saw a lawn doctor in the community, the vans driving all over, maybe they had an affinity because their family had the service, that might speak to them, and they're a great candidate for lawn doctor. And we still have, 150 to 200 territories throughout the US, which I think is a misconception. After 60 years, it's like there's nothing left, right? So there's that person who sees that and wants that. I think the person who sees Sparkle Squad on the other side of things, just to use a specific example, I think they like to be part of the innovation. They like to be part of something new. It's exciting, like this founder-led brand. And Chris resonates with me. And I love this super cool technology that literally we built right down the road in our manufacturing facility with a whiteboard and Chris and some technical people in a room. And now the vehicle that drives off our lot today and franchisees use is the best in the industry by far, without comparison. And so I think if you want to be a part of that, like there's someone who's like, no, I want that, and I understand there's, even with all of our experience, there are some different dynamics with an emerging brand that, you have to be comfortable with in terms of that profile. So at the top level, I would just summarize that and say, I think franchise candidates are all looking for something pretty similar, within a range. And then the brand itself is sort of like, what specific experience do I want as a franchisee and what really resonates with me the most?
Yeah. Excellent.
Scott, what about semi-absentee? We have a lot of clients that come in, want to keep the day job. They want to, do that and then add something that they can maybe transition into or just keep part-time. Is that reasonable for any of your brands?
So this might not be popular, but one of our core values is authenticity. So I will always be that. I just don't really believe in it. I think, broadly, right? And there are some exceptions. There are some models that you can plug in and you get multiple locations and you have small revenue streams from a number of points of distribution. I know them pretty well, and I respect everyone's model and differences. I would say the primary driver to that is exactly what you said. I want to exit corporate America. I want something different, but I don't want to take the risk, right? It's really hard to leave that income and do something different, right? And we've all seen that. We've had those conversations. For a period of time, there's some models where there's a bridge period and then you have to make a decision and lean all in. The notion of building an asset and really running it very, very well, semi-absentee, particularly around home and commercial services. It's blocking and tackling, it's full contact in my view. I just don't think works particularly well. Now we have a unique aspect of Sparkle Squad where you can bring in a GM. We have a program. You have to have them in advance. They have to come to training. There's a long list of criteria because we're about long-term success, relationships, unit economics, and we're not just going to open up that funnel, if you will, and bring someone in who we don't ultimately think will be successful, because it's a lose-lose and it's just too painful for someone who's making that kind of investment and change in their lives. So, I carve out that little uniqueness that I wouldn't really call in our world semi-absentee with Sparkle in particular. It's hard to do, right? Like this is a full-time thing. And I just believe we want a full-time commitment from franchisees, and we're going to give you more than a full-time commitment back as a franchisor. And that's where we unlock that kind of value that gets you to your why and your goals on an accelerated basis. And I'll just say one more thing. We talk about empire builders. I guess that's become a little bit of a term in franchising, but we sort of started here in a room and said, look, we want people, if you don't want to build a really big business in a relatively short period of time, we're not right for you. You're not right for us, right? Like this isn't like a side hustle type of thing. And so we've just been really intentional about the kinds of people that we attract and let into the system. And I think initially franchisors they want to open up the funnel. We're actually very deliberately, as you heard earlier, kind of narrowing the funnel. And we're just having much better outcomes for franchisees as a result of that approach.
Yeah. Maybe not popular, but
I'm sorry. Like that's just my personal view. I may not be right. It's just all I know.
Yeah, no, sometimes the truth is not popular. So I'm going to try to sneak in one more question and then we'll let Andrea take us across the finish line with some rapid fire questions for you, Scott. Cool. But are there cross-marketing opportunities between brands? And at what level? Does that happen at the corporate level, or does that happen at the franchisee level, where just two local franchisees, one lawn doctor, one Mosquito Hunters, kind of get together and do some things? Is that happening at all, and how?
Yeah. So the long-term vision, in full transparency, is we want footprints across the U.S. and many, many brands, right? And they overlap, and then that customer can experience all those brands. And what we know from our research is that when you buy home services, you buy many home services, right? And so when you have that great experience, you want to buy from a portfolio that you trust, right? So there's an entry point, and then we kind of cross pollinate to those other brands. So there's a very clear strategy around that. That's a multi-year strategy. Full transparency, which you'll always get. It's going to take a lot of time to build a lot of brands and a lot of overlapping footprints where we can fully unlock that value. So going back to expectations with franchisees, we're very clear to say, don't buy based on that, right? Don't become a franchisee based on that. Buy because you believe in the brand that you're operating, and you have these goals that you want to execute the model against, and you feel really good about the team and the vision and what we can provide, and your skill set match to that. I would say in this intervening period, absolutely the introduction between this franchisee and that franchisee in the community is really powerful, right? It goes back to that sense of community and the value of having so many great franchisees, and they work together, and you see them go to events together and start sharing customers and that sort of thing. And I think that's a way to start to incubate that, while we're working on the long-term vision and executing against that strategy.
Yeah, helpful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Scott, let's pivot a little bit. And now we're going to ask you what Chris likes to coin the rapid fire questions. And so with these, put aside all the Happinest brands and just think anybody owning a franchise. And so start out with somebody's going through the process. They're thinking about owning a franchise. What's one piece of advice you'd give them?
So I kind of have two pieces to this. I think they're both important. So the first thing I would say is get super clear on your goals and your skill sets, right? Like, I think people, like, they have an idea, they hear somebody did something, and then they start to lean into that. And this is just too big of a change in your life. And you just can't take that lightly and say, oh, let me just start looking at something. So I think I would suggest, whether you're a whiteboard person or you're a pad person, like, really sit down in your space and get clear on, what am I trying to accomplish and what am I really good at, right? And so, do you like to work with teams? Are you more of a, you want to kind of be a little more independent? What management experiences do you have? What are your skill sets? And start to really kind of do that self exploration to really understand, again, your goals, your skills. And when you have that written down, it's like, wow, that's really clear. I got it. Then the second piece I would say is, now you then start thinking about franchise concepts and things that might be a fit. And generally, you might find that thing that you experience as a customer and lean that way. I would kind of start broad, honestly, and think about just general trends that you see, and longevity of industries and those sorts of things. And then you get into really evaluating franchise concepts and make sure you do your homework, right? Like, obviously look at their disclosure document, talk to franchisees, because they've had the experience that you're very likely going to have, right? And you may hear a range of things, particularly with systems that have lots of franchisees, because everyone has their own experience and their own personalities, but you'll see themes start to emerge, right? So do your homework. There's a lot of information online. Look at their disclosure document, talk to franchisees, really understand the model and how it works and what the key drivers are. Also, what the biggest challenges are, right? Like, we have challenges, and we share those very openly. Then you really have the basis. Like, if you understand, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, here's what I'm really good at, here are some things out there that I've done some research on, in terms of trends and that sort of thing that makes sense to me, and now do research on concepts then I think you have this complete picture to make a really good decision that, quite frankly, may land in a place like nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to do pest control or I want to do lawn care. Like very few people. When you look at the attributes of those models and the way we approach franchising, it gets really exciting, and you just open your eyes to things that you may not have ever considered otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's great. So then, Scott, what if they've already bought the franchise and now they're in those weeds of that first year, which we all know is not easy? What's the piece of advice you're going to tell them during that first year?
So one of the things that we really look for in franchise candidates, and again, we talk about right up front, is, some people call it grit, some call it resilience. We've actually done some modeling around it, some profiling around it. We are very clear that we want people who are super positive people, by their nature. And we want people that when bad things happen, which they always will, they're resilient and they move past them. Right. And I say right up front, I was like, a vehicle's going to break down someday, a piece of equipment might have an issue, an employee doesn't show up or does a thing. Like that's business. Right. And we're very open about like, these things are going to happen. We're here to support you, right? And we support you in a very specific way, very prescriptive in terms of how we address these type of things. And the right person totally understands that and moves past that. And the first year in a service business is absolutely the hardest period. And I say, you're going to lift your head up and say, what did I get myself into? If you stay the course, we wouldn't have franchisees who have been with us 30, 40, in cases approaching 50 years. If this wasn't really meaningful, right? If they didn't love what they did, what they built, working with family members, serving people in the community, et cetera. So, if you're in it for the long game, the first year is going to be the hardest. And then it gets, easier as you go, and you can kind of fill in your org chart to do the things that, you don't want to do anymore, but you're doing a lot initially. And there are going to be challenges in any business, and we have to be okay with that coming into whether it's Lawn Doctor, Sparkle Squad, or anywhere in between. You have to be comfortable with that from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's challenging that first year, but you have to know there's going to be, an end in sight if you put the effort in. So
For sure.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. We love Happinest Brands at TPF, as you know, and I think, as people understand, I try to present it to clients, family of brands is a term I always use community of brands. I think it all kind of comes down to what do you get when you have this Lawn Doctor that's been 60 plus years, and then these new emerging brands that can leverage everything Lawn Doctor did, all the learning that you have, all the systems, the processes. I think that's really what you get in a community of brands. And I think you really showcase that a bit today. And so that's why I think Happiness is such a great business, whether it's a new emerging like a Sparkle Squad, or whether you go for more of an established brand like Lawn Doctor. But we really appreciate you coming on the podcast today and telling us a little bit about your brands.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And so if you're thinking about franchising, remember that while there's no one size fits all, the perfect franchise for you is definitely out there. To explore your options, visit theperfectfranchise.com and click on Let's Talk to schedule a call with a consultant on the Perfect Franchise team. We look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.